Hi friends, I need to start today with something personal. Something I don't say in every room, but I feel like this room deserves it. This conversation deserves it. You deserve it. You deserve it. There was a season in my life, and I remember it with a clarity that still makes my chest tight when the loudest voice I heard every single day was my own. Not cheering for me, not encouraging me, not lifting me up, tearing me down, slowly, methodically, with the specific surgical precision that only you can achieve when you are attacking yourself, because you know exactly where the soft spots are. You know exactly which words will land hardest. You know exactly which fears are real, and which failures still sting, and which doubts are just barely believable enough to do damage. I would wake up in the morning, and before my feet hit the floor, the voice was already talking. You're behind. You're not good enough. You're not good enough. Look at everyone else and look at you. You keep saying you're going to change and you don't. Maybe this is just who you are. Maybe this is as good as it gets for you. And the terrifying thing, the thing that I want you to really hear right now, is that I didn't recognize it as a problem. I thought I was being realistic. I thought I was being honest with myself. I thought the brutality of my own self-talk was a form of accountability. I thought that being hard on myself was what kept me from becoming complacent. I was wrong. I was so deeply, completely, expensively wrong. What I was actually doing was conducting a slow war against myself. And I was losing, not dramatically, not in ways that were visible to the people around me. I was losing quietly, in the gap between who I was and who I could have been. In the opportunities I didn't pursue because the voice told me I wasn't ready. In the relationships I held at arm's length because the voice told me I wasn't worth staying for. In the version of my life that was available to me and that I could not quite reach, not because the world was keeping it from me, but because I was keeping it from myself. And then something happened. Something small. Something that had no business being as important as it turned out to be. A friend of mine, someone I respected, someone who seemed to have that quiet confidence that I always admired from a distance, said something to me in passing. He said, "You know, the way you talk to yourself in your head is the most important conversation you'll ever have. And most people are having it wrong." I didn't say anything back. I kind of nodded and changed the subject. But it stayed with me. It stuck in a place that wouldn't let it go. And over the following weeks, for the first time in my life, I started paying attention to my own internal voice. Really paying attention, like a researcher, like a scientist studying a subject. And what I found was devastating. The things I was saying to myself, the constant, unrelenting stream of criticism and doubt and dismissal and belittlement. I would never in a million years have said those things to another person. Not to my worst enemy, not to a stranger, not to a child, but to myself, every day, all day, without hesitation. And that's when I knew something had to change. Not my job, not my city, not my relationships, the conversation, the one happening inside my own head every waking moment that was either building me or tearing me down. Today I want to talk about that conversation. I want to talk about it in the deepest, most honest, most practical way I know how. Because I genuinely believe with everything in me, that the single most important shift a human being can make is the shift in how they talk to themselves, not their bank account, not their circumstances, not their network or their education or their luck. The internal voice, the running commentary, the story you tell yourself about who you are, what you're capable of, what you deserve, what is possible for you. That voice is either your greatest champion or your most dangerous enemy. And the astonishing thing is that you get to choose which one it is. But here's the thing that makes this complicated. Here's the thing that makes it not as simple as just say nice things to yourself. The negative voice, the critic, the doubter, the voice of self-attack didn't show up out of nowhere. It was built carefully over years from the outside in. It was built from the things people said to you when you were young and impressionable and couldn't defend yourself. It was built from the classrooms where you got something wrong and felt the heat of embarrassment crawl up your neck. It was built from the rejection that hit before you were old enough to process it. From the comparison that started before you even knew what comparison was. From the messages embedded in advertising and culture that told you systematically, relentlessly, that you were not smart enough, not attractive enough, not successful enough, not whatever, enough. That voice is not yours. I want you to hear that clearly. The voice that attacks you, diminishes you, dismisses you, tells you to stay small and stay quiet, and not try too hard and not want too much. That voice is not original. It is borrowed. It is a collection of other people's fears and limitations and projections that you absorbed when you were not equipped to filter them. And you have been living inside it, as if it were the truth, as if it were you ever since. It is not you. And today we are going to talk about how to take your internal voice back. I want to tell you about someone. Her name is Lisa, and she is one of the most remarkable transformations I have ever witnessed up close. When I first met Lisa, she was in her early 30s, working a job that she had taken because she'd been told it was sensible, living a life that looked A from the outside and felt hollow from the inside. She was quiet in a way that wasn't natural, the kind of quiet that comes not from contentment but from the habit of making herself small. She would start to say something and then stop herself, start to have an opinion and then pull it back, start to dream out loud and then quickly qualify it, diminish it, make it smaller, make it safer before anyone else had the chance to. She told me once that she had been called too much so many times growing up. Too loud, too excited, too sensitive, too emotional, too ambitious, that she had eventually done the work herself. She had made herself less. She had turned down the volume on herself so thoroughly that she had almost forgotten what her full volume sounded like. And then she started doing something simple, something that felt at first almost embarrassing. She started talking to herself differently, not just in the big moments, in the small ones. When she looked in the mirror in the morning, when she was about to walk into a difficult conversation, when she made a mistake, when she succeeded at something, she started catching the automatic negative commentary and replacing it. Not with lies, not with hollow affirmations that felt ridiculous, but with the truth. The actual truth. The true truth that the critic had been drowning out. It took time. It wasn't a switch that flipped. But over weeks and months, something began to change. She started speaking in meetings before she had time to talk herself out of it. She started taking up space in conversations. She started saying yes to things that scared her and no to things that diminished her. She started carrying herself differently, not arrogantly, but upright, like someone who had remembered something important about themselves. 2 years after I first met her, Lisa had changed careers, built something she was genuinely proud of, and become one of the most magnetic, confident, purposeful people I knew. Not because her circumstances had transformed dramatically. Not because someone had come along and rescued her. Because she had changed the conversation. The internal one. The one that runs all day, every day, underneath everything else. She had changed that, and everything else had followed. That's the power we're talking about today. And that's what I want to give you a framework for over the next 7 days. But before we get to the 7 days, I need to spend some time on the science. Because this is not woo. This is not woo. This is not wishful thinking. The way you talk to yourself has measurable, documented, physiological effects on your brain, your body, your performance, and your life outcomes. And I think understanding why it works makes it easier to commit to doing it, Your brain, this extraordinary, incomprehensibly complex organ, does not distinguish clearly between what is actually happening and what you are vividly imagining or telling yourself is happening. When you imagine something with enough detail and emotion, many of the same neural pathways light up as when the thing actually occurs. When you tell yourself repeatedly that you are incapable, your brain begins to operate in ways that are consistent with incapability. It stops generating creative solutions. It stops registering opportunities. It literally filters your perception of reality to match the story you are telling it. This is not a metaphor. This is neuroplasticity. The brain physically rewires itself based on what it repeatedly processes. The neural pathways you use most frequently become stronger, faster, more automatic. The ones you don't use weaken and fade. Which means that every time you run the self-attack program, every time you replay the narrative of, I'm not good enough, I can't do this, I always mess up, nobody takes me seriously, you are literally strengthening the neural architecture of self-defeat. You are making it easier, faster, more automatic for your brain to generate that response next time. And the reverse is equally true. Every time you interrupt the automatic negative thought and replace it with something that is honest and constructive and supportive, You are beginning to build a new pathway. A pathway toward competence, toward confidence, toward possibility. With repetition, with the same kind of consistent repetition that built the negative pathway in the first place, that new pathway gets stronger, it gets faster, it becomes the automatic response. This is why 7 days matters. Not because 7 days transforms everything, but because 7 days of consistent, deliberate, intentional self-talk practice is long enough to begin to feel the shift. To notice that the automatic voice is not the only voice available to you. To have enough data points of a different experience to believe that the new pathway is real and building. Now I want to talk about what winner's self-talk actually is. Because I think there are two common misunderstandings about it, and both of them are dangerous. The first misunderstanding is that talking to yourself like a winner means lying to yourself, telling yourself you're perfect when you're not, pretending failures didn't happen, plastering fake positivity over real problems and calling it done. I'm amazing. Everything is great. Nothing is wrong. That is not what I'm talking about. That's not winner's self-talk. That's denial. And denial is the opposite of the clear-eyed, honest, grounded confidence that actually builds a winning life. The second misunderstanding, and this one is subtler but equally damaging, is that talking to yourself like a winner means being easy on yourself, letting yourself off the hook, never holding yourself accountable, never acknowledging when you've fallen short. Some people here be kind to yourself and interpret it as never challenge yourself. That's also not what I'm talking about. Talking to yourself like a winner means talking to yourself the way the best coach you've ever had talked to you, or the way you would talk to someone you love completely, who you were trying to help reach their full potential. It means being honest about the facts without being cruel about what they mean. It means acknowledging failure without making failure your identity. It means holding a high standard without using that standard as a weapon. It means seeing yourself clearly, your strengths and your gaps, your progress and your room to grow, and responding to all of it with a kind of language that moves you forward rather than the kind that pins you to the floor. A great coach doesn't tell their athlete, you were perfect today when they weren't. But a great coach also doesn't say, you're useless, you'll never be good at this, what's the matter with you? A great coach says, here's what you did well, here's specifically what needs to improve, here's how we're going to work on it, and I believe you have the capacity to get there. That is the model. You are both the athlete and the coach. And it's time to start coaching yourself the way a champion deserves to be coached. Let me walk you through the 7 days, not as a rigid program, not as a checklist, but as a journey that builds on itself. Each day as a focus, a practice, a shift. And together they form the foundation of a permanently different relationship with your own mind. Day 1 is about awareness. And I want to be clear, day 1 is the hardest day. Not because it asks the most of you, but because what it asks of you is the thing that most people never do. Day 1 asks you to listen, to actually sit with the voice in your head and hear what it's saying, without judgment, without trying to change it yet. Just listening, just noticing, just noticing. Most of us have never done this. We have the voice, it runs constantly, but we've never examined it the way you'd examine something important. We've been inside it so long that it feels like the air we breathe, invisible, assumed, unexamined. Day 1 is about making it visible. Getting outside of it for the first time or the first time in a long time and looking at it with honest eyes. Try this. Sometime today, set a timer. 15 minutes. Sit somewhere quiet and just pay attention to the thoughts that come up about yourself. Notice the ones that are critical. Notice the ones that are fearful. Notice the ones that are dismissive or despairing or small. Don't argue with them. Don't beat yourself up for having them. Just notice. And as you notice, ask yourself one question. Would I say this to someone I love? That question is the beginning of everything. Because the answer almost always is no. The things we say to ourselves, the relentless grinding criticism, the catastrophizing, the contempt, the constant measuring and finding ourselves short, we would never ever direct those things at another person. The moment we hear someone speak to another human being that way, we recognize it as cruelty. But we have been directing it at ourselves for so long that it feels normal. It feels like honesty. It is not honesty. It is habit, and habits can be changed. Day 1 is about waking up to the habit. Seeing it for the first time as a thing you are doing rather than a truth you are receiving. The moment you see it as a thing you're doing is the moment you have the power to do something different. Day 2 is about the origin. This is the day we go a little deeper. Because awareness of the voice is one thing, but understanding where it came from gives you a kind of distance from it that is incredibly freeing. When you know that the voice that says, "You're not smart enough," came from a teacher who said that when you were 9, and that teacher was wrong, and that 9-year-old absorbed it and never let it go. When you know that, the voice loses some of its authority. It becomes less the voice of truth and more the voice of history. History that you can acknowledge without being owned by. Think about the negative things you tell yourself most often. The ones that come automatically. The ones that feel most true, most certain, most unshakable. Then ask yourself, where did I first hear this? Who said this about me first? Because almost certainly, you did not generate it from nothing. Someone told you at some point, with words or with behavior, that this thing was true about you. And you were young enough and vulnerable enough to believe it. And here is the question that changes everything. Were they right? Not does it feel true. Feelings are not evidence. Were they right? Did they have access to all the information about who you are and what you're capable of? Did they love you completely and speak from a place of genuine wisdom about your potential? Or were they operating from their own wounds, their own limitations, their own bad day, their own need to feel superior or in control? Most of the time, when you examine it honestly, the answer is that they were not right. They were reacting. They were projecting. They were afraid of something in you that they didn't know how to handle. They were passing on what had been passed to them. And a frightened, limited, wounded person's assessment of your potential in a single moment when you were a child is not, has never been, and will never be the final word about who you are. Day 2 is about returning those borrowed beliefs to the people they came from. They were never yours. You borrowed them, usually involuntarily, and you've been carrying them ever since. Today you can begin to set them down. Day 3 is about the language of possibility, because there is a specific kind of language that winners use in their heads, in their conversations, in how they describe the situation and themselves. And it is categorically different from the language of people who are stuck. And the difference is not that winners are unrealistic or in denial. The difference is in a few key linguistic patterns that completely change how the brain processes and responds to challenges. The biggest one is the shift from fixed to growth language. Fixed language says, "I'm not good at this." Growth language says, "I'm not good at this yet." Fixed language says, "I failed." Growth language says, "I haven't figured this out yet." Fixed language says, "This is too hard for me." Growth language says, "This is hard for me right now." Do you hear the difference? The fixed version closes a door. The growth version leaves it open. And a door that is left open can be walked through. A door that is closed cannot. This is not optimism for the sake of feeling good. This is strategic. This is about keeping your brain in a state where it continues to search for solutions rather than accepting defeat. When you tell your brain something is impossible or beyond you or finished, your brain stops generating creative responses to it. When you tell your brain something is not solved yet, your brain keeps working. It keeps scanning. It keeps looking for the angle you haven't found yet. And the second shift in language on day 3 is from "I have to" "I choose to," and from "I can't" to "I won't." This sounds small. It is not small. "I have to go to work today" puts you in the role of someone being acted upon by outside forces, someone without agency, someone just surviving the demands of life. "I choose to go to work today because it moves me toward the life I'm building" puts you in the role of someone making a deliberate decision that is connected to a larger intention. Same action, completely different relationship to it. And "I can't do that" versus "I won't do that." There's a honesty in the second version that is actually empowering. When you say "I can't," you're giving your power away, saying the decision is being made for you. When you say "I won't," you're taking ownership. "I won't," you're taking ownership. You're saying this is a choice I'm making, and choices can be reconsidered. Limitations feel permanent. Choices feel like yours. Day 3 is about beginning to repopulate your mental vocabulary with the language of someone who is moving, who is growing, who is choosing, not someone to whom life is just happening. Day 4 is about the mirror moment. And I want to spend some time here because this is the day that makes people the most uncomfortable, which is usually a sign that it's the day that does the most. It takes something about behavior and makes it about identity. And once something is about your identity, once it's not, I made a mistake, but I am a mistake, it becomes very hard to move forward from. Because you can fix behaviors, but you can't fix identities. Identities are not problems to be solved. They are truths to be accepted or rejected. And if you've accepted a negative identity, you will live inside it. The winner's response to setback looks like this. 3 steps. First, acknowledge the emotion. Don't suppress it. Don't bypass it. Don't perform I'm fine when you're not fine. Let it be real. This hurts. I'm disappointed. I'm frustrated. This didn't go the way I wanted, and that is legitimately hard. Full stop. Emotion acknowledged. Second, separate the event from the identity. I made a mistake. Not I am a mistake. Not I am a mistake. This attempt didn't work. Not I don't work. I fell short of the standard I set for myself today. Not I am someone who always falls short. Specific, temporary, behavioral. Not universal, permanent, or about who you fundamentally are. Third, orient forward. What does this teach me? What would I do differently? What is one step I can take in the next 24 hours that moves me in a better direction? Not a grand redemptive plan. One step, one concrete, specific, doable step. And then commit to it and take it. That 3-step process, feel it, separate it, orient forward, is the formula for processing failure the way a champion does. Not pretending it didn't happen. Not collapsing under it. Moving through it and bringing what it taught you into the next attempt. Day 6 is about the relationship between self-talk and your body. Because this is something most people don't think about. And it is powerful. The way you carry your body affects the way you talk to yourself. And the way you talk to yourself affects the way you carry your body. They are in a loop, influencing each other constantly. Think about what you look like when you're in the grip of the negative voice. What does your posture do? What happens to your shoulders, your chest, your breathing, your pace, or breathing? Almost universally, the self-attack voice is accompanied by physical collapse. Shoulders forward and in, chest contracted, gaze down, breathing shallow. The body is literally making itself smaller to match the message being sent internally. And here is what the research says about this. And I want to be precise here because this is remarkable. The body-mind connection runs in both directions. Your emotional state influences your physical posture. But your physical posture also influences your emotional state. When you deliberately adopt an expansive, upright, open physical posture, chest open, shoulders back, head up, feet planted, your brain receives feedback from your body that is inconsistent with the self-attack narrative. And it begins to shift. This is not a trick. This is not fake it till you make it in the hollow sense. This is using the biology of your own system to support the work you're doing in your mind. When you feel the critic rising, when you feel yourself beginning to contract, stand up or sit up. Open your chest. Open your chest. Breathe deeply from the bottom of your lungs and then speak out loud or internally from the physical position of someone who believes in themselves. You will be surprised at how different the words are when they come from an open, upright body rather than a collapsed, contracted one. Day 6 is about becoming aware of the body-mind loop and beginning to use it consciously. To let your physical posture be a tool in the practice of self-talk, not just a consequence of it. Day 7. Day 7. Day 7 is the integration day. The day where you bring everything together into something that you are not going to leave behind when this week is over. Because the goal of the 7 days is not to have a good week. The goal is to begin building habits that become your new normal, the default instead of the exception. And on day 7, I want you to do something that many people find the most challenging thing of all. I want you to tell someone you trust about what you've been doing this week. Not because they need to know, but because the act of speaking it out loud, of claiming this practice in front of another person, does something to your commitment that staying silent cannot. It makes it real in the social world, not just the internal one. It connects your identity as someone who is working on their self-talk to a relationship, to a witness, to someone else's awareness of you. And I want you to ask that person something specific. Ask them, in your experience of me, what do you think I most often get wrong about myself? What do I dismiss in myself that I shouldn't? And then listen, without defending, without minimizing. Just receive what they say. Because sometimes the people who love us can see clearly what the critic has been blocking. They can see strengths we have been trained not to claim. They can see potential that the internal voice has been making arguments against for years. And then, and this is the most important part of day 7, write down your commitment going forward. Not a vague one, a specific one. Every morning this week, and from now on, before I look at my phone, I will say one true, kind, strong thing to myself. Every time I make a mistake, I will use the 3-step process instead of the automatic attack. Every Sunday evening, I will spend 10 minutes noticing how I spoke to myself during the week and what I want to do differently next week. Write it down. Because what gets written gets done at a rate that is dramatically higher than what stays in your head. Because the writing makes it a promise and not just an intention. Because you are making a contract with yourself, and the terms of that contract are your freedom. I want to spend some time now on something that doesn't come up enough when people talk about self-talk, and that is the relationship between how you talk to yourself and how you show up for other people. Because I think this is one of the deepest arguments for doing this work that there is. When you are in the grip of a vicious inner critic, you have very little to give. Not because you're a selfish person, but because a significant portion of your cognitive and emotional resources are being spent on the war inside your own head. The energy it takes to constantly defend against your own attacks, to manage the anxiety that the criticism generates to perform I'm fine for the world while you're drowning in self-doubt. That energy is enormous, and it is energy that is not available for love, for creativity, for genuine connection, for the kind of presence that the people in your life deserve and that you deserve to be able to offer. When you begin to quiet the critic, when you build the practice of speaking to yourself with honesty and kindness and strength, you free up resources that have been tied up in internal warfare. And those resources become available for everything else, for your work, for your relationships, for your creativity, for the parts of yourself that you've been too depleted to express. The people around you will feel the difference, not because you've told them you're working on your self-talk. They'll feel it in the quality of your presence. In the fact that you're actually there, in conversations rather than half there and half in combat with yourself. In the fact that you can hear their struggles without immediately filtering them through your own fears. In the fact that you have something to give because you're no longer spending everything on survival. Working on how you talk to yourself is not selfish. It is one of the most generous things you can do for the people you love. I want to talk about Muhammad Ali now. Because Ali is one of the greatest examples in human history of what it looks like to talk to yourself and to the world, like a winner. And I want to talk about him not just as a symbol, but as a person. As a human being who had fears and setbacks and moments where the voice could have won. Here is what most people know about Ali. He was the greatest. He said it constantly. He said it so often and so loudly and so confidently that it became something more than self-promotion. It became a force of nature. I am the greatest. I'm not the greatest. I'm not the greatest. I'm the double greatest. I'm the double greatest. It's hard to be humble when you're as great as I am. And people laughed and people rolled their eyes and people called it arrogance. But here is what those people missed. Ali was not born with that voice. He built it. Deliberately. Intentionally. He understood with a clarity that was years ahead of the sports psychology research that would eventually confirm it, that the story he told about himself before the fight was as important as the training he did before the fight. That the internal narrative, the belief that was either building him or eroding him, was not incidental to the performance. It was central to it. And Ali carried that self-belief into the hardest moments. The moment when he was stripped of his title for refusing to be drafted on religious and moral grounds and spent years unable to fight. The moment of exile when the thing he had built his life around was taken from him. The moment of the comeback when he returned to boxing after years away and many people thought he was finished, that his best was behind him. He talked about himself like a winner in all of those moments. Not always loudly, not always publicly, but internally he maintained the story. He held the belief. He kept the conversation in his own head aligned with the vision of who he was and who he was going to be. And Foreman. George Foreman in Zaire, 1974, The Rumble in the Jungle. Every boxing analyst, every expert Virtually everyone who understood the sport believed Ali was going to be destroyed that night. Foreman was bigger, younger, seemingly unstoppable. Ali stood in the ring against a man the world had decided was going to end him, and he talked to himself the whole fight. Not giving up, not capitulating to the consensus, running the internal program that said, I have something, I know something, I'm going to figure this out. And in the eighth round, after absorbing punishment that would have ended most careers, Ali stopped running the rope-a-dope strategy he'd been using and went on the attack. And the greatest upset in boxing history happened, not in spite of the self-talk. Because of it, this is what is available to you. Not the boxing, not the fame, but the internal shift, the decision to become the author of your own story rather than the passive recipient of whatever story the world tries to write about you. I want to tell you about another person. Her name is Sarah, and she represents so many people I've met who have been ground down by a particular kind of self-talk destruction. The kind that comes not from dramatic trauma, but from the slow, relentless drip of ordinary diminishment. Sarah grew up in a house where she was loved, but where praise was scarce, where effort was expected and acknowledged with a nod, and failure was met with disappointment that was expressed silently and thereby felt even louder. She learned to interpret silence as judgment. She learned to interpret the absence of praise as confirmation of inadequacy. She learned to be her own harshest critic because that's what she believed the people around her were thinking, and she'd rather do it to herself first than be surprised by it from others. She grew up, she built a career, she was by any external measure quite successful. But she told me that every promotion, every achievement, every recognition felt like it was built on borrowed time. Like she was getting away with something. Like eventually the world would figure out that she wasn't as capable as her results suggested. She had imposter syndrome in a way that was not just uncomfortable. It was debilitating. She was working 3 times as hard as she needed to, not because she was motivated, but because she was terrified, running from failure rather than running towards success. Those look similar from the outside, but they feel completely different on the inside, and they have completely different effects on your long-term well-being and performance. When Sarah started changing her internal dialogue, when she started slowly and imperfectly acknowledging her own competence, claiming her achievements as genuinely hers rather than as lucky accidents, speaking to herself about her own capability with the same credibility she'd extend to a colleague she respected, the first thing that changed was not her performance. Her performance was already good. The first thing that changed was how she felt. The anxiety quieted. The exhaustion that had nothing to do with how much she was working and everything to do with the constant internal battle began to lift. And then, gradually, the performance improved too, because she was finally performing from a platform of genuine self-belief rather than desperate avoidance. And the difference in that platform is everything.